Hi everyone, so I thought we'd live stream a little bit of Titanfall on the PC so you can get a sense for what this game's like. I'm just going to make a few tweaks I think to the audio from the game. It seems a bit loud to me. Give me one moment. Oops, let's get the right thing up. Let's just drop that back a little tiny bit. I want you to be able to hear the game, but likewise I want you to be able to hear me as well. Alright, let's rock and roll. Hopefully this should be a little bit better.
Call it when ready.
Let's have some stompy right now.
Bad news, boss. The IMC are way ahead of us. Still some time to catch up, though. Press the streak.
Absolutely massacring. Now, one of the things you'll notice with the PC edition game is a very, very stable frame rate, certainly on my rig anyway. I'm just going to make some tweaks to the audio I'm actually hearing because it's still very loud for me. Let's just drop that back a little bit so I'm not going deaf in one ear. Do let me know in the comments if any of the audio is a little bit too low or anything like that, if you can't quite hear me or if you can't quite hear the in-game volume, although game volume less important than being able to hear me. Maybe that's just my ego. Anyway, this is Titanfall on the PC. It is an absolutely stonking game on PC. In comparison, I'm afraid, to it being released on the Xbox One, which is just a mess, unfortunately. But, you know, playing this game on PC, you really get a sense for how this game is meant to play. Let me just quickly go and check a couple of things. There we go. Right, onward. Like I say, do let me know in the comments if there's any problems or anything like that. With the stream, we are streaming at 1080p at 30 frames a second. So bearing in mind that what I'm seeing here is obviously a beautifully crisp 60 frames a second constantly. You can see a frame rate counter up in the top right hand corner, keeping an eye on everything. I am absolutely storming away through here. Are there any pilots I haven't wasted yet? Ah, that guy, apparently. Anyway, so this is obviously running on PC. One of the main features really of the PC side of the game is being able to control what graphical settings you're using to kind of get the really the best frame rate you possibly can. Obviously with consoles you're very much locked to, well, what the developer has kind of come up with as the best happy medium. We are using insane textures here. Everything is turned up full with 8 times anti-aliasing, texture filtering should I say. I think anti-aliasing is currently turned off if memory serves, because it's kind of unnecessary these days. I'm just going to go and double check that, just for my own amusement. Let's see what I'm using. Yeah, anti-aliasing is off, VSync is on a double buffer, and anisotropic filtering is on 8 times for the textures. Then we've got shadow details on low. So effectively, I'm not making a massive use of the anti-aliasing. But frankly, on PC games with modern cards and a decent monitor, it becomes less of an issue anyway at 1080p. Let's see if we can actually find something where, there, you can just see where the anti-aliasing, can you see this moire lines down the edges there? Might show up on the 1080p stream reasonably well. That's where anti-aliasing would make a difference, but, it's not always worth, in a Twitch-based shooter, sacrificing 5 or 6 frames a second for anti-aliasing. Likewise with shadows. Shadows are necessary to kind of give some depth of field to the battlefield, so you can get a sense of scale and proportion of things you're shooting at and where they kind of are. But ultimately, you don't need them on high. Low is perfectly acceptable as long as you've got a bit of shadow there. That's usually more than sufficient. Let's have that guy down there. Likewise, the anisotropic filtering. Most systems won't cope well with 16. You tend to need SLIs for that to really kind of get the best from it, unless you've got a really, really beefy rig and a new graphics card. Let's match over. Oh, we lost as well. Gutted. This particular PC is not necessarily the fastest machine in the world. Well, maybe it's one of the fastest, but it's a Core i7 processor, which effectively gives it 4 cores plus 4 logical cores, hyper-threading, so you have 8 cores available in theory. If you know anything about hyperthreading, you'll know that it's not quite as clear and cut as that. What it does give you, though, is it's a bottleneck eliminated, effectively. So, you know, there's always plenty of cores available to crunch through whatever a game might be throwing at it. You can use a 4-core i5 or something from AMD. It will work just as well. But I do a lot of video editing and so on, and I need as many logical cores as humanly possible to, you know, render video frames quickly, basically. We also have in here 16 gig of Crucial Ballistics RAM. Its cast timings, I think, are 9994 off the top of my head, or 99924, one or the other, and 2 SSD drives, and those SSD drives are running in RAID 0. Now, the reason for doing that is when you used to RAID up traditional platter hard drives, you know, ones with a magnetic head and a spinning disk and everything like that, what you would find is adding additional drives into RAID, you're always paying what's known as an overhead, and that's usually worth between 20 and 30% of the drive's performance overall. So yeah, stacking 4 traditional hard drives together would give you a big performance boost, but it wasn't 4 times the performance boost. With SSD drives, a little bit like, you know, special powers in World of Warcraft, they buffs, they stack. So if you take a couple of SSD drives and put them together, you double the performance overall. Effectively, your PC can write data twice as quickly. It writes data to both drives simultaneously, half the data to one, half the data to the other, and you double your throughput. So when you look at SSD, a lot of the time, don't go for the biggest SSD drive you can get. Go for as many small SSD drives as you can get. You'll actually find a much bigger performance boost. You have to make sure you buy all the drives really as, you know, from the same manufacturer, same spec. Otherwise, your transfer rates and read rates drop down to the speed of the lowest drive. So if you've got some like 500 by 450 drives, and then you stick in a 220, 220, everything drops down to the 220. My advice, always buy those SSD drives at the same time. Always buy them, if you can, from sequential batches. That way you're always getting the same performance grade and effectively coming off the same production line. It can solve you a lot of problems in the long run. Oh, this one's taking a while to load. Let's have a look and see how our stats are doing. Hello, everybody. Please do leave us a comment. Let us know if you can hear the audio properly. One of the tricky problems I have here is I can't really hear what you're hearing without effectively doubling and tripling up the audio, and it becomes quite difficult for you guys to hear. So do let me know in the comments if there's any problems at all with being able to hear any of the game. Let's see. Hopefully we'll be back in now. Brilliant. Probably in Titanfall, my favourite Titan is the Ogre. It really offers the kind of tankiness that I tend to like playing in multiplayer games. I like being able to kind of stand toe to toe. I don't mind if I'm not putting out as much damage, not quite as agile around the battlefield. Really, all it matters. Why am I bothering with that? Really, all that matters is how long can I stay in the fight, pumping out whatever damage I possibly can. You just lose that kind of agility of being able to slide around the battlefield really easily. Right, let's go and cause some trouble, shall we? Yeah, I sacrificed myself, but it was worth it. C4 in this game is just ridiculously, I won't say overpowered because, yeah, it's overpowered. But, you know, C4, with the way that the AI and people tend to bunch up in this game, C4 is just absolutely devastating. It's not like in COD where it was more of a kind of, more like acting like a trip mine more than anything else, you know, throw it down, wait for someone to roll over. With this, if you get your execution just right, throw one there. Oh, they blew it up. That's the only downside with satchel charges. If you throw it out and you're being shot at the same time, you can inadvertently explode. One of the downsides, but never mind. What I was actually trying to do there, I was going to throw some C4, jump out this window, throw some C4 down at these guys and blow it, and try and bag myself. Ooh, a dirty camper. Right, I'm having him. Is he still there? Yeah, that's what you get for camping. That's what you get for not ducking. Anyway, I'm sure many of you have been playing Titanfall. What are your thoughts more than anything else? When I was playing this on Xbox One initially, that's where we first picked up a copy and got the PC edition the next day. My initial impressions of Titanfall were quite negative, really. On Xbox, it just felt, well, it wasn't a fun game because of like the frame rate problems. You know, when you've got a frame rate constantly glitching in a Twitch shooter, it's disorientating a lot of the time. It makes it really, really difficult to kind of lock onto your target and nail it basically. When you've got a frame rate that's actually hitting between 50 frames and 60 frames a second, that constant pitching doesn't make a game easy to play, even with the kind of auto-aimy way that console games tend to play, a lot more forgiving than a PC shooter. When you look at kind of a decent PC, which only has to be mid-spec, a quad-core is recommended, I would say, the game becomes absolutely phenomenal. It's so fast and fluid. And like I say, if you're willing to turn your graphics down, even if you have a sort of low-end PC, you can be talking, about a really decent game here. It is absolutely phenomenal what they've pulled off. Although I would still say this is not a game that is worth a full price, even on necessarily on PC. Do you know what I mean? So, if this game retails for, say, 35 quid on PC, although, Christ, I've seen Game trying to sell it for 40 odd, it isn't really worth that. There's not enough content here. Certainly not with a single player aspect missing, or a multiplayer campaign that doesn't feel tacked on. There's just not enough. That said, around the £25 mark, then it becomes very good value for money. I still think this was going to be a free-to-play title originally. It kind of just screams free-to-play at me. With the kind of slimmed down content, the single-player campaign, multiplayer campaign that's meant to be single-player kind of stuff. It's your story, it's your narrative kind of thing. It doesn't really work as a mechanism really for driving this game forward. As a kind of free-to-play title, it wouldn't have mattered. No one would have cared. So yeah, I do get the feeling this was meant to be a free-to-play game, and then Microsoft kind of stepped in and went, well, here's some marketing money, let's have it on Xbox. Fair enough, doesn't necessarily worry me. It may very well have created a better game overall at the end of it. But it does feel like with the content that they kind of put on offer here, and the way the game mechanics work, it would have been just as good as a free-to-play game as it would have been as a box copy. But ultimately would have been kind of better value for money as free-to-play, and I probably would have dropped money on this game. Quite simple, really. The game is good enough that as a free-to-play title, well, it's excellent actually, but as a free-to-play title, you would want to throw money at this. I would want to tart up my Titan and make it look more awesome. One of the things that I find kind of a little bit disappointing, I suppose, in some respects, is there's no way to kind of make my Titan and me feel like me. There's no real customization available here. I know that's something that we don't really get in COD either, but it would have been nice. I think we've moved on now from the days of everybody looking the same, and people want to adorn themselves with funny little trinkets and, hats. Steam and the guys at Valve have a lot to answer for when it comes to cosmetics, but they did find something that gamers actually would pay for in a free-to-play game. They'll pay to look a little bit different. They'll pay to look silly, to have that kind of unique look for a day, a week, a month, or a year. Why? Because we are all individuals, and in computer games, we want the guy who we've just killed to know it was us again. And at the moment, you don't really get that from Killzone, from Titanfall. Same problem with Killzone. And, I think it's time we moved on, and these customization options could kind of be included. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, certainly over this last year with free-to-play games being all multiplayer-led and so on, we're kind of now moving away from the traditional multiplayer, single-player way of looking at things. I think now it's going to become much more, you're either a multiplayer game or you're a single-player game. If you're a multiplayer game, more than likely you're going to have some free-to-play elements there, or some form of cosmetics, in-app purchases, etc. And hopefully, as the guys at Assassin's Creed found, which I thought was quite interesting, they've been able to give away all of their multiplayer content for free, new maps, etc., because their download content that people paid for made it financially viable. And so you avoid that problem that games like Battlefield and COD have, where when you want to play the multiplayer, you've got to make sure you have all the map packs, etc., which obviously, in Battlefield's case, is going to cost you about 40 quid or more. In part, we're kind of starting to move away from that now. Kind of thinking to ourselves, well, all right, why can't we just make a brilliant single-player game or a brilliant multiplayer game? And then the multiplayer game can actually expand and grow based on that single-player content being bought. That is a really smart way of doing it, and I think it hopefully will be, a dominant kind of way over this next generation to deal with the problem. Otherwise, we have to go either multiplayer only or single player only, and someone loses out, because some people prefer multiplayer, some people prefer single player, some people would just like the choice to do both if they want to, when they want to. And they keep saying games are getting more expensive to make and all of this, but actually our middleware tools are getting better as well. So actually the costs will generally level themselves out. They're always high at the beginning of a generation, but bearing in mind that now this generation is more closely built on PCs, the actual problem of, oh, things are more expensive, not necessarily. You were already, as developers, having to produce higher resolution textures and so on for PC games anyway. Otherwise, PC gamers are going to go, well, why should I buy new graphics cards? Well, that's not the reason why NVIDIA and AMD, should I say, put so much money into their marketing schemes. It's because PC gamers are discerning gamers. They want the very, very best because they've invested in that technology. Ultimately, games developers have already had to go down that route. They're already costing more money than it was in the last generation because they've had to put more time and effort into PCs, higher resolution textures, better lighting, etc., taking advantage of what is there within, the latest and greatest graphics cards, utilising DirectX 11, for instance. So, for my mind, it's a kind of a moot point. What game developers are really complaining about is that they're not making enough money relative to the amount of money they're having to spend to reach these next generations, as it were, and to keep up with the demands of the PC gamer. Now, there's not a huge amount that you can kind of do about that other than look at optimizing the toolchain, look at optimizing the workflow. So, what you're actually developing is you can develop faster. If you're developing faster, presumably to a much higher quality as well, generally speaking, you'll save money, but that initial investment, that first 18 months of tooling up, either producing those tools yourself or buying them in, that's where that cost is, and that ultimately gets to be spread, usually across your first game, because for most development houses, they live game to game. One bad game and their company falls apart. Simple as that. We've seen that a lot over the years. So, all of the risk is up front, but I think this next generation, with the strength of PCs, with what Microsoft, AMD and Intel and NVIDIA are doing, not only on the graphics front, but on the actual CPU, physics side, and so on. We've now reached a kind of point where PC gaming has re-entered almost its golden age again, because developers have got to build for PC, because ultimately that's where their toolchains sit. Or, obviously on Macs if they're graphics guys. But, when you actually look at how development on PC has gone, we've only kind of kept pushing forward. Consoles kind of got stuck for a number of years. Then we've had a new generation just come out, and they're very close to PCs. And so a lot of the work is initially done on PC now. A lot of that development time, the cycle, you don't spend time working on a dev box particularly. You never really did. It was really just for testing your code and debugging. But ultimately now the tool chains are so close together that building something on PC means that you can very quickly port it across to, obviously, Xbox One's DirectX 11 and OpenGL, which I think is being used on PlayStation 4. And then all you have to do is tweak things to get them running as best you possibly can on those consoles. Now, obviously, there's bits of the development process there that, are kind of bespoke to each console. There's certain techniques and so on, certain ways of handling textures and memory and so on that are very unique to each console, and in many respects unique to each individual type of PC. PCs are a nightmare for developers because you have so many different types and specs of machines to kind of hit. That's why we found with Titanfall on PC that we had 38 gig of audio, because the guys at EA decided that they needed Titanfall to run even on lowly PCs with dual cores. The problem there is you can't use compressed audio like we would on quad-core machines, because unfortunately the PC will spend most of its time decoding all of the audio and less time actually working on, the gameplay aspect, pushing textures around and making everything really nice and pretty looking along with the graphics card. So they decided they were going to use basically uncompressed textures, with the aim being that no strain would be put on the CPU, because uncompressed uncompressed audio uses very, very, very tiny amounts of CPU cycle, because CPUs have been designed for dealing with uncompressed audio. When you sort of look at quad-core PCs or quad-core chips and computers running more modern hardware, I suppose, those bottlenecks are eliminated, and you've got 4 cores minimum. So effectively, you can spend your time on one particular core if you feel like it, decoding all of your audio, or decompressing all of your audio, streaming it into your game. Fine, no problem, no penalty really hit there, no impact on the resources of the machine whilst it's gaming. Unfortunately, with dual-core PCs, and the majority of dual-cores are pretty old and pretty lousy looking, spec-wise, you just can't do it. And so we've got this bizarre situation where the game is taking up 50 gig of space, yet actually it probably only needs about 18 gig realistically. As we've seen on the Xbox One, where you can use compressed text, compressed audio, then it's about an 18 gig download, I think, or 18 gig sat on the drive uncompressed with all its textures, etc. It's a viable way of doing it, and my little mind thinks to myself, guys, EA, Respawn, why didn't you just give everyone the option? If we've got nice beefy PCs, download the compressed audio. If we haven't, then fair enough, those poor buggers are going to have to download 50 gig of data, 38 gig of audio. I can't think that it wouldn't have been too difficult to have a little check on the installer that analyses a DX diag or something and goes, oh, yeah, this is a beefy PC, let's not waste download time, bandwidth, etc. And, generally just give the game to people faster and, have a bit more of a modern install base. Because I'll tell you something, 50 gigs sat on some SSD drives, it's hideously inefficient. Really not what SSD is meant to be for, but anyway. As you can see, I've been so busy talking, I've not actually been killing anything. Like I say, do let me know in the comments if there's any audio problems, if you've got any questions, if there's anything in Titanfall you'd like me to take a look at, or if you just want me to wax lyrical about, games, technology, PCs, and stuff. What we got here? Let's have this. Oops. While I quite like the ice pick, I think it's quite a nice little thing in Titanfall. It kind of needs more uses. It's only really for the turrets and for the spectres. Other than that, it doesn't have very many uses really. Right, where is everyone? I've got a Titan out here somewhere. Let's have him. I love doing this. Just looks so cool. So my favourite Titan so far is most definitely the Ogre, along with the chain gun, I think it is. Especially once you kind of open it up later on and you gain access to... It's a bit uncivilised. Punchy, I'm getting out of here. Ooh, it's going to hurt. No, good. With the chain gun, I really like having that shield as well. I think it's better than the Vortex, in my opinion. Just a little bit more versatile. And, it creates quite nice little choke points when you need it. Thought so. Where is everyone? Something tells me he's going to try and come across the top of here in a minute. One thing that I thought was just a genius move on the part of the developers in Titanfall is auto run. I mean, I honestly don't know why nobody kind of thought to do that before, but you would think that it would be an absolutely essential aspect of most shooters because you spend so much time running. And then, in of itself, to then tweak the game mechanics so that the penalty isn't quite as stiff if you're running and gunning at the same time. It really has saved wear and tear on my hands. Certainly when you're playing COD and Battlefield and so on, God, having to constantly, every time you want to get anywhere, pressing your thumbstick or what have you, God, it hurts. And on PC as well, when you kind of have your standard keybinds, which normally puts run on your shift key, yeah, again, you're kind of stretching your fingers in really weird ways, and just generally giving myself RSI. So when I noticed in Titanfall they actually had an auto run always, or auto run after a short second delay. Brilliant. I mean, every shooter that comes out from now on will be graded on its ability to not give me RSI. So I certainly will, be looking at new shooters coming out and saying, well, why haven't they got an auto run button? We've proved that works really nicely, and it really does add the fluidity of the game, not having to constantly be hunting for your, run button, etc. Now, I know I talk a fair bit of flack for my comments on the Titanfall Xbox One frame rate, but I stand by absolutely everything I said, and whilst Digital Foundry weren't able to, or didn't capture any footage of the frame crash, where it drops to 5 frames a second, we did a little sort of party here at the office the other day. We got a load of people who hadn't seen Titanfall yet on Xbox, and we sat them down, and then we played through. And it was only about 3 or 4 minutes in that a scream went out from everybody, and it was a big girly gamer scream, by the way. of, oh my god, what is going on? And the frame rate had crashed out completely. Now, the interesting thing is, as things have started to improve, and I presume this might be Azura's cloud from Microsoft was causing the issue, we hadn't encountered that problem for a few days. So whether the issue was at Azure Cloud, we checked our network connections and everything like that. We're pinging 35 milliseconds to Microsoft's cloud, stable all of the time. But like I say, these frame crashes were definitely there and were witnessed by a wide group of people, including people who have very little knowledge of what frame rate actually is. It was so obvious that everybody noticed it immediately. This kind of dunk, where effectively you got maybe 3 frames spread over, 180 frames. I can't do my maths this morning. Spread over probably 2.5 to 3 seconds of real time. And effectively what you ended up with was kind of like stutter, and then suddenly back to full speed. It was like suddenly seeing slow motion, but jarring slow motion, where you're dropping all but 1 frame out of 59 over 3 seconds. It was ugly, really ugly. Like I say, that problem has not reared its head on Xbox for a while. However, all of the issues that Digital Foundry found on their video, their frame rate analysis, shows that the frame rate really wasn't stable anywhere close to 60 frames a second. If you were going to kind of say this game actually runs on Xbox One at 50 frames a second, peaking at 60, not at 60 frames a second, it dips to 50. 50 was probably what I would average it out at most of the time, 50 to 54 frames a second. It really isn't good enough. And again, one of the things I kind of thought was, if it's having this many problems at this stage, they probably should have delayed the game so that the guys at Respawn could get that extra connect power across, extra 8% of connect power, which probably will stabilise the frame rate quite a bit. Apparently, that still is not in developers' hands yet. It wasn't utilised in Titanfall, so that extra resource from Connect is still effectively AWOL, which is a bit of a shame. It's one of those things where it kind of just puts a bit of a, bit of a negative shine really on what Microsoft are trying to do with the Xbox One. Shooting people on my own team. I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and he said to me, it almost seems like Microsoft knew that Sony were kind of bringing their console out, and they pretty much just had to rush out whatever design they had available. And actually, when you look at DirectX 12 dropping in 2015, that maybe was more the timeline Microsoft were wanting to work to. That actually they would have launched with DirectX 12, they would have ironed out a lot of these issues, and maybe actually they would have had higher performance parts in there as well, because they obviously had an extra 18 months within the supply chain to negotiate those deals and so on. But ultimately, once they had kind of worked out where Sony was very likely to launch, end of 2013, they kind of had to just get a move on. And that may very well also have impacted significantly on the device we've ended up getting from them. I'm accused a fair few times of being a Microsoft hater, a Sony fanboy, and it simply isn't true. I've actually, if anything, over the years, I've been more of a lover of Microsoft's technology, because generally speaking, when they get it right, they absolutely nail it. And if you think at when the Xbox 360 came out, everyone was fairly negative about it. Oh, it's Microsoft. I was like, actually, they're doing some stuff here that I think Sony are going to struggle with, and we were right. Microsoft absolutely nailed the last generation. Unfortunately, I think here they've maybe been caught out at the wrong point in the cycle, and potentially with some executives who didn't quite get what they were meant to be producing. This whole idea of a media device first, actually that's not what the majority of people wanted. The real mess they made of explaining the always-on functionality as well. Again, you kind of have to say to themselves, well, it was a self-inflicted wound because they did such a poor job of explaining it. If they'd have explained it well, as we then came to understand it over the next few months after they talked about it, actually it looked like a really good idea, and it would have been quite like literally a winner, I would have thought. But their executives, their marketing guys, really, really failed to explain to the majority of people what this was going to be about and how it was going to work, and that let fear do the rest. And you'll hear a fair bit from me over the years about FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt. And FUD is a weapon, and it's used by technology companies, and PR people quite a bit in marketing. And it's a way of kind of sowing seeds of doubt against your competitor or against the next big thing that your company either has no interest in, is scared of, or realise it's behind the times. And Microsoft has always been a master of FUD, has of other companies, and it's really used just to sow doubt to make people think, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy this new big technology. And actually Microsoft suffered their own dose of FUD, where effectively bloggers, gamers, anybody who was kind of watching that live feed, they invented their own series of FUDs based on the poor explanations Microsoft were giving us for how this stuff was going to work. And as we then knew, that basically put paid to what Microsoft were trying to do there. They had to give up. It's a shame. It happens. It's one of those things. But ultimately, FUD is a powerful weapon when used by marketing people to kind of take on a lot of what these, rivals will try and put out. And, especially in the technology industry, blimey, it's driven a lot of the time where Intel has got to over the years by using FUD to kind of say, oh, well, AMD's chips, they're not as good at doing this, or there might be this particular kind of problem with their manufacturing. Little things, little whispers, especially when new ideas come out like Mantle, etc. And you'll see negative comments floating around some blogs, etc. A lot of the time it's FUD. It's basically paid for negativity. Pushed out through press releases or through, words to analysts, etc. And the idea really is to kind of slow down the march of, a competitor, or to kind of try and say your technology is already proven compared to this new technology coming onto the market. Just quickly sending a tweet. And then we'll get back to a bit of Titanfall. Like I say, do let me know in the comments if you're having any problems with the audio, if you can't hear me properly, if you can't hear the game too clearly. And, do let me know if there's anything you'd like me to explore in Titanfall. There's a whole world of cool stuff in here that is really worth taking a look at. Just bear with me one moment. I appear to have lost a window in YouTube that I was using just to monitor the stream. Give me one moment while I get that back. There we go. That's better. Like I say, we are streaming live now, so if you would like to, please do let your friends know. Let them know that we're streaming Titanfall live on PC. I'll be talking again in a little bit about how our PC setup that we operate here, and a few other bits and pieces. I'm just quickly sending some messages out, so I'm probably wrecking this game for some people who are attempting to play it, but people's got to watch the stream and all that because, it's fun and it makes me feel important. And, my ego does need a stroke every once in a while because I'm not particularly egotistical, it has to be said, which is why I don't ever appear on camera, you'll notice. If I was like all those other YouTubers, I'm afraid I would be, plastering myself on billboards and all the rest of it. I'm too old and too wise for all of that. Boom time! So here we are back in Titanfall. This is being played on the PC, and I'm going to throw some C4 in there. Oh no, I'm not. I'm going to get shot in the back. Probably my favourite part of Titanfall are the burn cards by a country mile. They are the best innovation that I think I've seen in a shooter for a very long time, and they totally change the dynamic of the game in brilliant ways. They really do. Ooh. So for instance, one thing I'm doing here is I'm just stacking up my Titan call options using pull rank, which knocks time off the Titan build, and that means that very early on in this fight I've got the Titan out. So they might have killed me, but they haven't got their Titans, so I'm going to go and do some stompy. Using burn cards judiciously is, the secret really in this game. They can make or break. Okay, looks like we're going to have some Titan on Titan action here. Where out? Got ya. Oh, that rifle does way too much damage. You've got to let your shields recharge in this, or again. Yeah, this is not going to go well. Time to change tactics. Come on, eject. Why am I not ejecting? That's weird. Phew. I think I couldn't eject because I was sort of underneath a little something, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. I think I've spent so much time talking that I've gone off my game a little bit. Let's see if we can get some back. Right. Wall jumping and changing directions in this game is, you know, by far the most important aspect, because you can kind of loop round people. Most people in this game are still playing based on, you know, one field of verticality. So, you know, you can run and you can jump once. People don't still seem to realise that you can use the walls as springboards, building up speed pretty much the whole time. And that allows you to do stuff like that, where you can literally just do a 360. And, you know, if somebody's chasing you, just nail them. Again, obviously, if you've got someone who knows what they're doing, they can use that same thing to their advantage and use it to kind of jump above you. And there's also my other favourite thing is the wall stick. It does mean that you don't get access to... Gotta love it, haven't you? It basically, you put your knife into the wall and you can hang there. Now, you can't then go into iron sights to look down your iron sights, but what you can do is, as I just showed you there, is throw some C4 on people underneath you and end them. So that switch to ours, good. Crossfire, gnarly. Oh, I don't really want that yet. Actually, yes I do. Perfect. What we're going to try and do with this massive explosion is get into a centre of a load of these Titans, let them batter me to death, and then blow up. Really is the best tactic. Yeah, come and have me. I can't do anything about this guy because he's got a shield boost on. But what I can do is this. Let me just get out in time, because the ogre doesn't move very quickly. Not quite. Got him. There we go. And then escape. You see, when you kind of learn your way around Titanfall and you get the fluidity of it, you can pull off some pretty cool stuff. You know, just because you don't take the Titan out on the first hit doesn't mean you're not going to be able to pop him from above. Oh. That guy got me. Like I say, do please let me know in the comments if there are any problems at all with the feed or stream. I obviously can't hear exactly what you guys are hearing without causing some problems. I do rely on you. Oh, it's just too good to be true. Anybody left? No. Oh, one guy. So, you see there, I was literally able to jump 4 times there by using the walls as a bouncing point. That gets me up to those higher points. I'll throw some more C4. C4, it's almost overpowered in my opinion, just because of the blast radius on the stuff. And the way you can kind of just mop up large numbers. I mean, especially right at the beginning of a match, if you can get in behind the kind of enemy lines or to the side of them and flank them, a lot of the time the enemy players will bunch up with the AI. I have no idea why. Worst thing you can possibly do. And all you've got to do is just throw some C4 in there and you can kill, well, a ridiculous number of people. You know, get the grunts as well. There's very little left after that. Yeah, that was a bit overkill on a grunt, but hey, should have saved it for this guy. Another auto Titan. Best option. Get me out. Damn. One of the sort of preferred tactics I have is to use the Titan really as bait. Put it on auto Titan and let it do its thing. Oh, come on. I shot that guy in the head. put it on Auto Titan, just use it as bait, because most pilots cannot resist seeing an Auto Titan to jump on the back of, at which point you then kill the pilot. Simple as that. One of the things that I do love about this game is the speed of the weapons as well. At 60 frames a second, the guns are just meaty. I don't really like all the guns. Some of them are fillers more than anything else. They're really just about, you know, particular types of roles people like to play. For my mind, the SMG is by far the best gun in the game. It has really nice short and medium range, which for most maps is all you need. Sniping, I don't know. I used to love sniping, but of late doesn't really do anything for me in a lot of these games. They've almost kind of gimped sniping to make it less interesting or less palatable to people. Or well, just generally less powerful, I think, which is a shame. You know, I think sniping was always an art form when done correctly, and with, you know, a game that kind of wants to support that gameplay method. In Battlefield, it always just felt, well, currently it feels weak, is my view. I know a couple of friends, they love sniping. Doesn't do anything for me in these current generation of games. Excuse me. So do let me know in the comments if there's anything you would like to know about Titanfall or anything like that. If you're playing Titanfall yourself, how are you getting on? Are you finding the game fun? Do you, you know, prefer playing on Xbox One to PC if you've tried it on both? Do let me know. Always interesting to hear your thoughts and feedback. Lost another one. Promise. Oh, pardon me. Oh. Talking and playing at the same time, not always easy. Not to be consistent, anyway. I'll just quickly send a few tweets again. If anybody ever fancies, you know, becoming our live producer while we do these things, do let me know. Always needing people to help send tweets and everything like that. Should go and sort my burn cards, but anyway. Come on, Twitter, stop being a pain. One thing that I really wish YouTube and you know, generally streaming in general, the software we use for doing this stuff, wish it integrated a bit better with things like Twitter and so on, so that you don't have to send quite so many messages all of the time to let people know you're streaming, etc. Some kind of auto reminder would be really nice. So it'd make my life a bit easier anyway. Thin the ranks. Don't forget, we're currently running a competition with Total Tech War where you can win a Sony W earband Walkman and some smartphone and tablet docks as well. You can find that up on our channel. If you've not entered, it's really easy. All you need to do is subscribe to Total Tech War and the Androidizen, leave us a comment on either of our competition videos, and you'll be entered into the competition. Dead easy. Have I got something new to play with on? Ooh, Arc Mines. Good fun. Oh, damn. Oh, my favourite map. I know why they picked this one for the beta, because it's brilliant, frankly. It is a really well balanced and well designed map, in my opinion. Some of the Titanfall maps are, you could almost say they phoned it in, actually. Funny enough, some of the maps feel like they were built for a completely different game and then retrofit with the necessary mechanics for double jumping, etc. Things are just spaced too far apart and they put zip lines in. I couldn't quite work out whether the zip lines kind of had to be retrofitted in because they changed the gameplay mechanic at some point. So maybe you weren't able to jump, maybe you were able to jump further when they were doing internal testing. But it certainly feels like some of the maps just weren't quite designed for the game we finally got now. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of works itself out with the map pack they're going to be doing. I think we've got 2 or 3 DLCs of maps coming out. I do hope they give us more than 2 maps at a time though. I think, 4 maps, bare minimum really. And, 2 of those maps need to be absolutely fantastic, and 2 of the maps can be dross as far as I'm concerned. Let's just stick with convention on that one. When has a map pack ever been full of absolutely grade A maps? It's always a mix of stuff that's great and a bit rubbish. And I'm looking at you, Battlefield, for that one, by the way, and COD. And pretty much every other shooter that's ever done DLC. Obviously it's personal choice, I suppose, whether you like a particular map or not, but, usually when speaking to friends and associates, you tend to find the same complaints come up over and over again. Why is that map so rubbish? Most of the stuff in the China Rising map pack, for instance. And again, as I was saying earlier, this process that we have at the moment of, multiplayer maps being paid for, it actually causes problems for multiplayer gamers because it means you can't easily play with your friends. And I'm sure, some games developers think that's a brilliant thing. Oh great, they'll have to buy my DLC. But actually I think in most cases it works against the games developer. That means they're not going to sell as much DLC. Overall, or people are just going to stick to the single player stuff. I mean, your other issue there is, if you have a friend who doesn't have the DLC, well, you're going to be playing the old content again. However, if you use the single player DLC to pay for the work, as Assassin's Creed did, on their multiplayer content, then everyone gets the multiplayer content for free. Everyone gets to play multiplayer, and you can pay for the single player. For me, I mean, that just feels so much closer to how it should be, given that most multiplayer is very thin when it comes to actual gameplay content. You're doing the same maps and the same things over and over again. In a single player, at least there's a narrative and an evolution usually of the style and the gameplay mechanics over time up to the final levels, unlocking guns, etc. Now we have that in the multiplayer stuff, but it's still thin content in comparison to what tends to go on in the single player stuff. Doesn't it make much more sense to give away the multiplayer for free so everyone can play it, because generally speaking it's a thin end of the wedge, and charge for that single player content where so much more time and effort has to go into, especially if you have cutscenes and so on. Multiplayer was always kind of the fun thing developers used to build in their spare time. It was never the main cut and thrust of their games. It's like, when you kind of think about Quake and things like that, a lot of the time the multiplayer was there as a kind of funny curiosity, something for people to do on their lunch hour at the games developers. It was never generally intended to be, well, what it became now, which is, in Titanfall, the primary reason, or the only reason, to play the game. As I say earlier, if you're just tuning into the stream, I always think that with Titanfall, it feels like it was meant to be a free-to-play game that then became a paid-for product. Conceptually, there are things here that feel like they would have been perfect in free-to-play, and not necessarily something you would have had to fork over money for. There's too thinner kind of content here, even for a multiplayer game. But as a free-to-play game, where you maybe have been able to pay to tart up your Titan with, paint your Titan and everything like that, add liveries, make your pilot look a bit more awesome, it would have probably worked exceptionally well. And it would still have had graphics on this kind of scale, because as we've seen with games like Hawken and MechWarrior and so many other free-to-play PC games, it's possible to have stunning graphics and still offer a game for free and make money out of it. If 3% of your player base hands over money and you've got 100,000 players on a regular basis, your quid's in, you're sorted. Most multiplayer games, like a World of Warcraft, only need 100,000 players paying a monthly subscription to sustain themselves. Actually, you find that you only need 100,000 players to sustain yourself as a free-to-play game as well. You can clearly see that games like Elder Scrolls are on the wrong side here. They're putting a barrier in the way of gamers, people who will play the game, and would spend money, and they're still not necessarily going to make any more money out of their game overall. And again, I think Guild Wars 2 has really shown how well that can work. You could have a free-to-play game. Well, I say free-to-play, it's a box copy game. You buy a box copy, there's no monthly subscription. It's sort of like free-to-play. It's that halfway house. And they're still releasing great content on a regular basis and expanding the world. But they're not charging anyone the monthly fee to do it. I just thought that when Elder Scrolls came out and said, oh, we're, it's because we want to release great content every month, I thought actually that's just a bit of a thin excuse, really. It's been proved that you can still do that anyway. My feeling, Elder Scrolls will be a free-to-play game by 2015. There is no two ways about it. They simply cannot carry on with a subscription model on a game that I'm afraid is really, really badly made. If it was a great game, if it was holding together well, either as an MMO or as a game from an MMO point of view, I'd be saying, yeah, it's probably worth that subscription and box copy. Frankly, it's no World of Warcraft. Even World of Warcraft at launch had a better feel to it than Elder Scrolls does now. And I did play in the last final beta, as it were. There's just not enough kind of coolness going on there with game mechanics and how everything kind of fits together to really make it worth playing. Maybe it will improve after launch, but from what I've seen, they've got a game engine there and a set of baked-in game mechanics now, which are exactly as it's going to be. It's not a game that I found particularly entertaining, and I've played a ridiculous number of MMOs. At one point, I could actually say I played every MMO that had ever been released. It's much more difficult these days with free-to-play games. There's so many of them out there, but Elder Scrolls, it just doesn't do anything for me. And speaking to a lot of other people as well, and also looking at what some of the other respectable guys out there, like Kyle at Ars Technica, he had exactly the same thoughts as I did. That it fails at ESO, Elder Scrolls Online, at being either a great Skyrim style game, an Elder Scrolls game, or being a great MMO. It actually fails at both things it tries to do, which is a pity, But anyway, back to Titanfall. As I say, let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, if you're having problems hearing the audio on the stream or anything like that, or you'd just like to say hello, and I will happily say hello back to you. Ooh, let's get out of here. This is going to hurt. That particular rocket is probably one of my favourite ones because it's a dot, damage over time, and damage over time is always very useful, especially if you're kind of in more of a sustained fight. Again, also in Titanfall, one of the things you need to be kind of looking for is the headshot. The opponents, the enemy Titans' heads do glow red, which is basically where the pilot is sat. If you can land your hits on there, you tend to strip their health off much, much quicker. He did very little damage to me there, actually. Does he run away? Oh, he's running away! Because he knows I'm in an ogre and I can't catch him. So I hope somebody bottlenecks him down here, I think. So we're running this on PC at a locked, well, not actually quite 60 frames a second at the moment. I think the streaming is just taking its toll a little bit on my rig here. So we're currently hovering sort of, wow, between 50 and 60 frames a second with some dips at 45. But bearing in mind I'm live streaming from the same PC that I'm gaming on. So, even seeing 60 frames a second most of the time is something of a marvel. Certainly of modern computing anyway. If you went back a few years, we were always using separate PCs for actually doing the kind of streaming if we wanted any kind of quality. But now, if you've got a quad-core i7, which gives you 8 logical cores, and everything else, 16 gig of RAM, nice fast graphics card. Incidentally, we're using a Radeon 7950 in here with 4 gig of GDDR5, and it's the reason I went for this particular graphics card is because it's an absolute beast for overclocking. It has an overclocking kind of threshold on there of about 30% above stock. So at the moment, its stock clock is 850 megahertz for the GPU, and I'm currently running it at 1150. And likewise, the memory is usually clocked at about 1100 or 1200, and it's currently clocked at near 1400. And without using any more power or generating even a smidge more heat. One of the things that AMD really did there is they knew their particular graphics card had a massive amount of overclocking in it. They decided the best thing to do would be to leave that power for gamers. So produce a card that has plenty of power in it, and it's on, in the mid-range of the cards, as it were. And essentially, you don't want the mid-range card to have more performance, i.e. written on the box, than the card you're going to charge $200 more for. But it kind of becomes kind of like a little bonus, really, for gamers that are discerning and they know what they're looking for. They do their research. And, you can, in every generation of cards, you will always find a few there that have massive overclock potential for a variety of different reasons. Usually it's a case that the manufacturer produced a ridiculous number of the high-end chips, And, they thought to themselves, well, we'll just use that chip, we'll knock off a few texture units here or there, and we'll put that into our mid-range card. But what you've actually got is you've still got the performance overhead, the performance room of the more powerful graphics card. You're not going to have quite as many texture units maybe, but you will be able to crank the card that much faster. And generally speaking, if you come within 10% performance threshold of the higher end card, but it costs you $200 cheaper, you're laughing. Back in the day when CPUs were quite a bit different than they are today from a design point of view, one of the age-old things was you would buy a chip and it would be this particular version, like an SX chip or an MX chip, and what you would have is it would actually be the more expensive, more powerful chip, and all they'd done is they'd knocked a bridge, a small piece of silicon effectively in a circuit, off the bottom of the CPU, and all you had to do was get a pencil graphite, which is pretty much any good quality pencil, get that and draw in the bridge again, so effectively creating an arc between these two connectors, and suddenly you would have the more expensive chip. And the same is kind of true that we can do with GPUs these days as well, but without having to use graphite. You'll find that bits of the card have kind of been chopped away or locked away in software. You can re-enable those or overclock things to get the performance back. PCs, for my mind, they offer so much flexibility if you're willing to buy into it early on. And if you pick the right hardware at the right time, then you'll have a PC that'll last you years and still be capable of putting out, well, as my rig does. We're capping at about at 60 frames a second, but this is actually running on a 120 frame monitor. So if I want to, I can open up all of the power of the graphics card, get 120 frames a second. Sometimes, depending on the game, I'll have to make some adjustments to say, okay, turn the shadows down, maybe drop the texture quality a little bit. But ultimately, you've got that kind of flexibility there, and gaming at 120 frames a second is just beautiful. Everything is so smooth, and you have effectively double the amount of information available to you when you're gaming. You've got, if somebody comes around a corner and you're coming around a corner at the same time, strictly speaking, you'll gain just a fraction of an advantage by having just a little bit more information there. And again, for a Twitch shooter, that little bit of extra quick reaction time can make all the difference, certainly in competitive play anyway. Just waiting for this to load. I'm just going to have a quick look again at Twitter and what have you, just see if there's anything I need to be worried about there. Mick Kazurs, we're actually streaming now, so you should be able to see the stream. We're actually, when you posted that comment, we've been streaming for about 10 minutes or so. Do let me know if you are seeing the stream now. I've just double checked it and I'm watching it absolutely fine. Just stop that so it doesn't interfere. But yeah, we are live streaming now. We're just waiting for this match to start. It's trying to find me some people to play against. And obviously when I do these live streams, it's as much about the gameplay as it is about me just waxing lyrical about the industry and gaming and the things that interest me and entertain me. So do throw in your thoughts into the comments and let me know what you think. Have you played Titanfall on Xbox One? Have you played it on PC? Played it on both? What do you think? Do let me know. You see we've had a fairly popular stream today, lots of people dipping in and out. If you're a regular subscriber, hello and welcome. It's always nice to be able to kind of talk to you guys a little bit more directly, so do let me know in the comments. And if you're new, if you've never tuned into an Androidizen channel, the Androidizen channel before, do subscribe. We cover a wide range of technology. We'll cover everything from next-gen consoles to Android. Might even find an iPhone in there at some point when Apple produces one that doesn't suck and has a screen bigger than a gnat. But ultimately, the Androidizen channel is all about the best of technology. And the worst of technology as well, which is why I get quite a lot of flack for my problems and failures videos. But ultimately, we're not here to blow smoke in anyone's general direction. It's certainly not up your posteriors. If a company produces a piece of technology, a game, or what have you, and it's phenomenal, we say, and we will scream from the rooftops, these guys nailed it. But ultimately, when a company releases a product that fails at its primary reason for existing, which is either to solve a problem or to be a new something or other, or just to perfect the thing it's trying to do, but fails miserably, ultimately we talk about that as well. And that's why Microsoft has come in for so much criticism from me over this last couple of months, because ultimately they keep giving me things to talk about which are negative. If Microsoft did something, as they did when they mentioned ray tracing, and I was like, now something interesting and useful from Microsoft that might actually make a big difference here to what we're seeing from their kind of product. I will talk about it, and I will tell you how amazing this could very well be. But unfortunately, Microsoft just keep, messing things up for themselves, really. And, as a journalist, it's not my job to sugarcoat, companies' product releases. It really isn't. If they get it right, we say. If they get it wrong, we say. And ultimately, that's what our honest opinion direct from the UK is all about. That's our mantra here. We're not here to, like I say, blow smoke in anyone's general direction. We're here to give an honest opinion. If Sony were in exactly the same situation as Microsoft, if this was a role reversal as it was in the previous generation, Sony would be getting a world of criticism from me right now. They really would. But ultimately, the reason why we don't have very many things to grumble about with Sony is they kind of haven't done anything bad. A lot of their stuff is kind of rough edges, where Microsoft is kind of like really poor decision making at an executive level that's kind of led them to have a really poor looking console right now. That may very well change over time. We'll more than likely see Microsoft gain some ground, but it's more a case of how long is that going to actually take. Do you know what I mean? If it's 2015 before we see DirectX 12 and frame rate improvements and resolutions that are actually 1080p 30 or 60, which is the bare minimum I'll accept in a game for a next-gen game, then, they may very well find that they're out of the market by then, because Sony's going to eat their lunch, Amazon are coming into the market, Google's coming into the market, and Nintendo in 2016 will have their new project as well, which is called Fusion. I don't know whether anyone has seen the initial specs of Fusion, but if they are as rumoured, then they are going to be stonking. It will come roughly on paper around 10% lower on performance than the PlayStation 4. However, it will be probably around 30% more powerful than the Xbox One. And that's going to be a really dangerous place for Microsoft to be in if raw throughput of numbers is going to be the decider here. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be anything like that. One thing Nintendo are very good at is using reasonably good parts inside their machines, but completely hobbling their developer tools. So, to the point where you actually can't really squeeze much performance out of them. Should have thought about that, really. So, whilst Nintendo might very well end up with an on-paper more powerful console, it could very well be that the middleware tools that they're using, which I think are going to be predominantly based on Unity and the Crysis engine, that seems to be, from what I've heard, what they're basing the bulk of their kind of optimization work hardware-wise on. Certainly from an SDK point of view, they want developers to use Unity and potentially CryEngine as well. And obviously, we may still see Unreal Engine in there. Not that I've heard anything about Unreal Engine on Fusion particularly, but Unity has most definitely been mentioned a number of times. It could be that Nintendo kind of try and go down the independent developer route predominantly, and that's where they feel that they can actually have a big impact in the next generation, in a way that Sony so far hasn't, in my opinion, and Microsoft definitely hasn't. Independent developers right now are the lifeblood of this industry. Those big AAA titles, as I said earlier, those developers are one failure away from closing doors a lot of the time. A little bit like the movie industry. Big studios, they're generally only a couple of flops away from bankruptcy themselves. You put hundreds of millions in some cases into movies, and you put upwards of 30, 40 million into some games. There are some games out there that have broken the 100 million mark, and if you're putting that much money in, there's a huge amount of risk. If that game flops, you're pretty much done, or you're going to be selling bits of your company, or having to take out big loans to kind of cover your next game development. With indie developers, they're fast, they're small, they're loose, and they get the job done. They can turn around stunning games on their own. I mean, God, look at Minecraft. If that isn't the rallying cry to the whole games industry for how this next generation is going to play out, Minecraft was the one. It said to everybody, you can be a dude, you can have an idea, you can effectively release an alpha prototype, which is nothing more than kind of your random mumblings in code visualized on screen, and you can make $1 million. You can then put the price up and make $5 million. You can then put the price up again and make $40 million. And then the big games companies start swarming around you, trying to buy you, to acquire you, to hire you, and the likes of Microsoft and Sony fall over themselves to put you on their games console, where previously they'd kind of been ignoring indie developers, thinking, who would want to play a game with graphics that look like that? Well, here's the thing. Graphics are 10% of what we really look at here anyway, of a game. You know, that is the visual strike, really, of the developer. That is their brushstrokes. But ultimately, it's their mechanics that make or break the game. If you've got great graphics but awful game mechanics, it doesn't matter. You've got a crappy game. But likewise, you can have a game that has atrocious-looking graphics by our standards, you know, what we see today, but can have a gameplay that just is mesmerising, that sinks time like no other. And you know, there's games like Terraria, Starbound as well, that kind of go for that kind of lower quality of game graphics, but just ooze gameplay like no other. And that's what indie developers are fantastic at, you know, finding that sweet spot where they can think to themselves, our gameplay is so strong here that actually we don't really need amazing graphics, not if it's going to impact our ability to have this game played by a wide group of people. And sort of Titanfall falls into that category a little bit, because when you look at it, the guys at Respawn were pretty much independent. EA's kind of left them alone initially. They went to EA to set up, purely because EA has the money, and if you're going to produce a game like this, you're going to need a fair chunk of cash to get yourself started, especially if you're being sued by your former employers. You know, those legal costs were certainly going to mount up if they didn't have someone like EA effectively paying them. And, you know, one of the things they ended up doing on PC was the audio quality is slightly different, because what we have here is uncompressed audio. Because for PCs, for lower end PCs, you can't decompress the audio without having an impact on the frame rate. So what you do is use uncompressed audio, which will just stream nice and easy over the CPU and has a negligible impact on the audio, the gameplay quality, you know, the frame rate, etc. Again, a series of compromises, and that was to make sure that this game would operate on the widest range of low-end hardware around, just like independent developers, you know? You've got to kind of think about these things, because if you played a game called PlanetSide 2, which was made by Sony, technically one of the most brilliant games I have ever played, certainly as a multiplayer shooter with a kind of range of, a mass of players like you have never seen before. Thousands of players all occupying very small areas. Generally speaking, I mean, the maps are huge, but you know, kilometres and kilometres of terrain. But ultimately, you've still got thousands of players running around in this environment, shooting at each other, and all the prediction code that goes on. But do you know what the main problem that the guys at PlanetSide 2 had? Unfortunately, the game didn't run very well on even sort of medium to high-end PCs. You know, on my rig here I'm using here, it was perfect, 60 frames a second, everything turned on high, but everything had to be overclocked on my rig. I had to run my CPU at 4 gigahertz, graphics card clocked to the 9s, even my RAM had to be overclocked just to try and eke out a stable frame rate at 60. And all that was down to was one mistake they made right at the beginning when they started doing the world design and designing the buildings and everything. Instead of using smaller textures, they used huge textures and built one great big. So like, if you look at this grate, in PlanetSide, this grating would have been one great big grate, you see. Now that's actually quite an inefficient thing to kind of do in sorry, I've got that the wrong way around. In PlanetSide 2, they had lots of small grates all stitched together. So you've got multiple objects. So instead of one great big grate like you have here, you would have 20 small grates making up one big grate. Now each of those objects has to be, well, accounted for in the world. You're having to load it, you're having to render it, etc. That one mistake they made meant the thing didn't run properly on anything but the highest end PCs out there. Now that's fine and all if you only want the smallest portion of the user base. You know, if you only want to make money out of 5% of people, great. But for a free-to-play game, that is no good whatsoever. And of course, they then suffered horribly with people saying the game was unplayable, you know, which ultimately meant the player base started to drop because people couldn't play with their friends, etc. So what did they do? They had to spend, I think, 4 months it was, effectively redesigning every single part of the world. And they're still working on bits of that. I think they've just launched one of the other maps has now been converted. And I'll tell you something, the difference in the frame rate is stunning. I've gone from like playing at 60 frames a second to being able to play at 120 frames a second without making any other changes, purely because they well optimized the game. You know, fixed their mistakes they made right at the very beginning. And those were important. If you're bringing the game to the PlayStation 4, fair enough, it's a powerful old machine, but you're still not going to be wanting to waste resources that you could be spending on other things like nicer lighting or faster gameplay, etc. On, well, effectively rendering bits of metal and objects and boxes, etc. They had a crazy situation where they had 5 or 6 different types of box, textured and styled differently, modelled differently, within the same small environment area, like packed one on top of each other. Well, the problem there is you're asking the computer to have to deal with 5 different objects when it could actually just render one object 5 times. 5 objects 5 times, 1 object 5 times. There's a big difference in the kind of resources required by the PC to do it, amount of RAM, texture memory and everything. And, you know, gamers, we don't even notice. Things are happening that quickly. I couldn't tell you whether a box is a duplicate of another box or is actually a completely different box. I don't care, frankly. I'm not going to be ducking behind this box thinking to myself, oh, look, they put 2 different styles of box there. How nice. No. Look, those 2 barrels are identical. The reason they're identical is because I've only had to waste computer resources rendering one of them. Simple as that. You know, that object is just one object, one set of textures, duplicated. Then here, look, we actually have 3 different styles of box there. But actually, yeah, 3 different styles of box. Actually, do all of these? There's structables as well. Makes a bit of a difference. But yeah, so you've got 3 different styles of little box there. I don't know why I did that. It's just fun. But anyway, as I keep repeating, if you cannot hear me, if there's any problems on the stream at all, do let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, queries, thoughts, anything like that, do let me know. It's all good fun. We're currently playing Titanfall on PC at around 60 frames a second. Noticed actually some of the maps are definitely heavier duty when I'm streaming for the frame rate side of things. Look at that. If you look at the top right hand corner, you can see the frame rate taking a bath. This is purely because I'm streaming from the same system, by the way. When I'm not streaming live to YouTube, I have a solid 60 frames a second throughout, no problems at all. Come on, walk into my drop zone. Oh, good. If you play Titanfall, have you given your Titan a name? Mine is called Bob. Bob the Titan, or Bob the Ogre. And yeah, Bob doesn't usually last very long, but he has a habit of doing a lot of damage. Oh. Eject, eject. Eject! Uh-oh. Well, that didn't work too well. I think I must have been under an underpass or something. Alright, well, it's been absolutely fantastic fun playing Titanfall for you guys and generally waxing lyrical about gaming in the industry. So do tune in again next time. We don't tend to publicise the live streams too far in advance, that's just the way we work. So, you know, do keep one eye on your subscription feeds, etc. If you're not a subscriber, please do. And there's always new content every single day, and we do some live streaming every so often as well. Usually when there's something interesting to talk about. Haven't done a live stream for a while, so thought it would be a good opportunity. Like I say, do please subscribe, do hit the like button, do let your friends know about the channel, and yeah, do always let me know in the comments if there's any particular games or technology you'd like us to check out. Hopefully this has been great fun, and I'll see you again soon. All the best.